Hello, Math 8 students, and here is another lesson on solving one-step equations. Today we're going to focus on multiplication and division equations. So here we have our first equation. Remember, we are going to use inverse operations. So the inverse of multiplication is division, and the inverse of division is multiplication. So we should know from prior lessons that whenever we see a variable and a letter standing right next to each other, that there is an invisible multiplication symbol there. This means 7 times x. So the opposite or inverse of multiplication, as we said, is division. And we're going to show division from now on in equations using a fraction bar. The fraction bar also means division. And we're always going to divide by this number, which is called the coefficient. We're going to divide by the number in front of the variable x. We are not going to change the sign. We are doing the inverse using division. So we're going to divide by the exact number that is in front of the variable. And we do that to both sides. The reason why this works is this is saying 7 divided by 7. Remember, anytime a number divided by itself is always equal to 1, and 1 times x is equal to x. So these basically cancel each other out because they are equal to 1. So we now have x is equal to, and then we're simply going to use either mental math or our calculator to do negative 84 divided by 7. So negative 84 divided by 7, and we get negative 12. It's always a good idea to check your work. So when we're checking our work, I always like for my students to start by rewriting their equation. If you want, you could put that multiplication symbol there. And so what we're going to be doing is we are going to be substituting in our answer for the x. So instead of saying 7 times x, we are going to be saying 7 times our answer, negative 12, and we're checking to see, does that really equal negative 84? So again, going to our calculator, 7 times negative 12, and that does equal negative 84. And since we have the same number on both sides of the equation, that means that our equation checks, and we should have done that correctly. So notice the difference between this first example and the second example. The main difference here is that you can see that on the second example, our variable is on the right-hand side of the equal sign. It really does not matter if the variable is on the left or the right. Remember, our goal is to be isolating this variable term by doing the inverse operation. So here's our variable. They're multiplying it by negative 3. So what would be the inverse of multiplying by negative 3? The inverse would be to divide by negative 3. And if we do it to one side, we must do it to the other. Negative 3 divided by negative 3 equals 1. And 1 times x is x. And so we have x is equal to, using our calculator, we simply do negative 87 divided by negative 3. Notice I'm using the minus sign for my negative, and we get 29. So if we are going to check our answer, we're checking to see, does negative 87 equal negative 3 times x? Or does negative 87 equal negative 3 times the answer we got for x, which was 29? And then using our calculator, negative 3 times 29, and that does equal negative 87. So if you would happen to get something like negative 87 equals negative 84, double check your work on your calculator first, and then go back and check your work on your equations. Now, I know that some people might be able to solve these equations mentally or just be able to type it into your calculator, but do know that part of what you're going to be graded on when you take your final assessment is whether or not you can show your work. And so you do need to be showing your steps in your practice because that will be part of the requirement for your assessment. So let's look at some equations that are a little bit more complicated. So here we have example 3. We have 2/5 x is equal to -4. This means that we have 2/5 times x. Now, there are two different ways that we can solve this equation. So if I have 2/5 x is equal to -4, we can really kind of just go exactly like what we just did, and we can say the inverse of multiplying by 2/5 is to divide by 2/5. 2/5 divided by 2/5, any number divided by itself is equal to 1, and 1 times x is x. These cancel out. And so then we simply need to use our calculator to do this kind of complex division. -4 divided by 2/5. So -4 divided by 2/5. Make sure that it looks like what you have up there. And we get -10. Now, some teachers aren't really wild or crazy about you doing these kinds of questions this way, although I don't really mind. What a lot of teachers will say is remember back in earlier classes that whenever you divided by a fraction, you changed it to multiplying it by the reciprocal. So if I have the fraction 2/5, the reciprocal simply means flip it over, which would be 5/2. Reciprocal just means flipped. So instead of doing division of the original fraction, we could do multiplying by the reciprocal. And again, whatever we do to one side, we have to do to the other. If you did this on your calculator, 5/2 times 2/5. So let's go ahead and look at that. 5/2, bring your cursor up, times 2/5. Oops, let's go back. 2/5. Notice I get 1. Anytime we multiply by a reciprocal, we get 1. So again, these are eliminated because they equal 1, and 1 times x is x. And then we could do -4 times 5/2. And notice we again get -10. So anytime you have a coefficient in front of your x that is a fraction, you can either divide by that fraction or you can multiply by the reciprocal. You need to decide what's easiest for you. I'm not going to do the check here since we did the equation two different ways and got the same answer. So let's do the same thing here. Let's work this problem two different ways. So we have -3/5 x is equal to 21/40. So the inverse of multiplying by -3/5 is dividing by -3/5. Any number divided by itself equals 1, and 1 times x is x. So this might look a little funny on our calculator, but we're going to type in the fraction 21/40. And then we are going to divide by -3/5. And notice I do not have a fraction. When we have fractions in our problem, we should have fractions as an answer. So I'm going to turn that back into a fraction, and I get -7/8. Let's look at the other way that we could approach this problem. So again, -3/5. fifths x is equal to 21/40. This time I'm going to multiply by the reciprocal. So I'm going to multiply by 5 over -3, 5 over -3. Whenever we multiply reciprocals, we get 1, and 1 times x is equal to x. And so now on my calculator, I'm going to do 21/40 times, oops, we got to make sure we bring that cursor up, times 5 over -3. And turn it back into a fraction, and notice we get the same thing. So fractional coefficients, you can either divide by the fraction or multiply by the reciprocal. All right, so those were kind of our multiplication equations. Here we have some examples of division equations. So the reason why this is a division equation is, remember, we said the fraction bar also means division. So this says x divided by 5. So we have the equation x divided by 5 is equal to -4. What is the inverse of dividing by -5? Sorry, the inverse of dividing by +5. The inverse of dividing by +5 is multiplying also by a +5. We do not change the sign. 5 divided by 5 is equal to 1. Those are eliminated. 1 times x, x. And then -4 times 5, -20. Again, don't hesitate to use your calculator if you need help with those negatives. So let's check our work. So x divided by 5 equals -4. We're going to substitute in our answer for the x. So now we're going to say -20 divided by 5, and we're checking to see, will that equal -4? So -20 divided by 5, and that does equal to -4. Both sides equal each other, so that checks. So notice the slight difference between this equation and this equation, and this is this little negative sign out front here. So that can be read as a negative or the opposite of, either way. And similar to our fraction problems, there's multiple ways that we can approach this, but what we want to do to make our life a little bit easier is we want to take this negative sign and we want to either bring it up and attach it to the x, or bring it down and attach it to the 9. We cannot do both. There's only one negative. Now, a lot of teachers will tell you to bring it up, but it actually saves you a step if we bring it down. So we're going to rewrite this equation as x divided by -9 is equal to 8. So what is the inverse operation of dividing by -9? The inverse is to multiply by -9. And if we do it to one side, we have to do it to the other. -9 divided by -9 equals 1, and 1 times x is equal to x. And again, if you need to use your calculator, 8 times -9 is equal to -72. If we want to check our answer, let's go ahead and check our answer with this version of the equation. So we're going to substitute this in for the x. And so we're checking, does -72 divided by -9, is that equal to 8? So using our calculator if necessary, -72 divided by -9, we get 8 on both sides, so our equation checks. Last type of equation. So again, doesn't matter which side of the equation the equal or the variable is. Keep in mind our earlier examples, when we have fractions in our equations, our answer should be written as a fraction. If we have decimals in our equations, our answer should be written with decimals. So here I have my variable x divided by 2 3/10. What should we do to solve this equation? We should be multiplying both sides of the equation by 2 3/10. These equal 1. X times 1 is equal to x. And then we're simply going to use our calculator to do 2 3/10 times a negative 5 3/10. And we get negative 2.3. I'm going to check my math here. That doesn't seem quite right, but I think it is. Yep, negative or 2.3 times negative 5.3, and that's equal to negative 12 19/100. So again, we could check our work. We could be checking to see, is negative 5 3/10, is that equal to x divided by 2 3/10? So when we substitute in negative 12 19/100, I'm simply going to use my calculator for the right-hand side. I'm going to type in negative 12.19 divided by 2.3, and notice I get the same thing, so our answer checks. So there are several examples of multiplication and division equations. I can't show you every single thing that might possibly come up, but remember, your idea is to find your variable, identify what operation is happening in the equation, and then doing the inverse operation to isolate the variable. You don't forget to use your calculator to help you with complex operations like fractions, decimals, and negatives, and check your answers to make sure you're correct, and be sure to be showing your work. Your teachers cannot help you find your mistakes if you're not showing your work, and it doesn't take you very long to show those steps. Good luck on your practice, and see you at the next lesson.